More than a lakh of people, including soldiers, women, kids, hundreds of horses and elephants, tons of wood material, tents, and whatnot. All this together constituted the journey from Pune to Delhi in early 1760. To be precise, the journey started on 14th of January 1760. It was a very fascinating story of a journey across the continent to meet with the enemy and get killed in the end. So the enemy became all the more important, demanding such a huge operation. It intrigued me a lot, and I kept thinking about how to introduce this enemy, Ahmad Shah Abdali. I had to design something unique for him. A scene from the film Panipat, directed by Academy nominated Ashutosh Gavarikar. I had half a dozen palaces to shoot in this film. The colorful, opulent Shaniwarwada, which is the headquarters of Marathas, the predominantly white Shujauddaulah Palace, and a couple of other palaces which kind of looked similar in architecture and color scheme. We had been shooting the Shaniwarwada in ND Studios, outskirts of Bombay. The introduction of Abdali Palace was only 2 to 3 days of shoot. So putting up a separate set for that was not viable economically. So we decided to take an existing set and alter it to our needs. So we had a meeting with the production designer Nitin Desai, and he came up with an interesting new design. I wanted Abdali introduction to be unique. So I looked at his character and thereby into history. So one of the first questions which came to my mind was, why do these conquers and invasions happen? Yeah, of course, it's a way to get wealth and find resources to run the country. At the same time, this kind of established supremacy over other kings and kingdoms nearby. And it was very important in that period to have this supremacy because nobody believed in equality. This is the time before democracy came into this world. And probably the king wanted to keep the people, the public, busy, give them employment, ask them to join the army. Otherwise, those same people may turn against the king himself. I remember a T-shirt which I saw a long time back. On the print on the T-shirt said, "Join the army, go places, meet interesting people" in bold letters. And below that, when you go closer, you see that very fine print below that which said, "And kill them." This was the lifestyle of 1700s where this story happens. Abdali invaded India 8 times for the reasons I mentioned before. If you look into the details, you realize that most of these invasions happened in the winter. So there is a hidden clue behind that. So the climate, the extreme cold could be one of the reasons for them to leave their frozen land behind and come to the more comfortable plains of India. In the film, Ashutosh has mentioned upon this in one scene where Abdali lands in India. He is offered a platter of fruits. He looks at it and says, all the fatigue of the tiring journey of crossing mountains and rivers kind of evaporates at the sight of these tasty, juicy fruits. Abdali introduction was a very beautifully written scene. It was a very small action scene where he confronts his own brother who is launching an attack on him to capture the throne. So an element of suspense and intrigue was already present in the film. So with all this information, I decided to design a color scheme to introduce Ahmad Shah Abdali. It should represent the climate, the cold, and intrigue and suspense. So I thought I could use black, blue, and white as the basic elements of color scheme for this scene. So I thought I should start from there. We had only one scene in the palace, which was placed in the courtroom of the palace. I had decided to keep it kind of dark to go with my color scheme. Me and my team visited the set a couple of times when the construction was underway. It was not a very big studio and it was not a very big set either. The walls of the set was around 15 feet height. There was a catwalk above that. And 7 to 8 feet above that was the ceiling, the sloping ceiling of the studio. It was pretty cramped. And there were no windows on the set except one big door with steps descending into the courtroom. A cold sunlight filtering into the room was the beginning of the idea. So how do I get sunlight into the set? Of course, not real sunlight. I can't get real sunlight. It's a studio. I have to create sunlight with artificial light. It's possible and it has to look real. Now, to make it look real, I have to start from reality, which means I have to imagine that there are windows above the set level. Suppose there are windows on the ceiling and the light is filtering through those windows and coming to the set. It's possible. Um, if at any point, if the ceiling comes in the frame, I could ask the VFX department to create windows in the post and put it there. So the idea sounded interesting. Now, how to create a believable sunlight patch in the frame? You put a light on the catwalk facing downwards into the floor, switch it on, and introduce a window cutout in the light path around 10 feet away from the light. Now it creates shadow of the cutout on the floor. Now you block off all the light spilling outside the cutout from all the four sides. Now what you get is a rectangular patch of light falling on the floor. This kind of looks like a believable sunlight patch. Now the brightness of the sunlight patch depends upon the power of the light, and the sharpness of the shadow depends upon how far you have put the cutout away from the light. The further the cutout, the sharper the shadow. What we realized during those visits was that we don't have sufficient space in the studio. If you put a light on a catwalk which is 15 feet height and introduce a window cutout below that, that'll come in the frame. There's no space for that. So we decided to extend it some way. After long discussions, we came up with two decisions. Number one was we will take the help of mirrors to extend this distance. How do we do that? Instead of putting a light on a catwalk, we decided to put a mirror on a catwalk exactly where we wanted the light, and put a light far away from the mirror on the same catwalk and shine it into the mirror. Now adjust the angle of the mirror in such a way that you get a rectangular patch of reflection on the floor. Now it looks like a light patch. Now this helped us in two things. One was to increase the distance between the floor and the light, and second was we got a sharper pattern. Now decision number two was, instead of introducing a cutout into the light path, we decided to use the mirror itself as a cutout. So that kind of solved our space crunch in a big way. In my color scheme, I had blue and white as my basic color elements. So we started imagining that the panel, the window panel on the ceiling could have colored glass, stained glass with blue and clear sections in it. My team started experiments to figure out the main aspects of this lighting scheme. One, the power of the light, how big the light should be. Two, the pattern, the design of the window pattern. Three, the hue of the gel which has to be used on the window pattern. Four, the distances between the light and the mirror and the floor, etc. Now, since I'm using it as a sunlight patch, I needed maximum brightness for the patch. Now, all other lights like background light, character light, fill light, etc. depends upon the brightness I can create for the light patch. Now, to create a brighter light patch, I need a powerful light. Now, the bigger the power, the light, the body of the light gets bigger and bigger. Now, I told you that I have a small catwalk, so I can't put two big lights there. So finally, after the bargain, we decided on using 6 kilowatt lights. Since I have 6 light patches, I had 6 kilowatt lights and 6 mirrors placed on the catwalk. After going through mirror, gel, etc., those lights gave me just sufficient, just basic enough light brightness on the floor. Now we come to the practical issues. How to fix 6K HMIs and mirrors on a small catwalk. We managed to do that, but the main struggle we had was light number 1 interferes with the mirror of light number 2, 3, or 4, or 5. So that created another light patch on the floor. So we had to completely cut off these lights from other mirrors. Every light has to be cut off from other mirrors. Otherwise, it would create multiple patches on the floor, very confusing kind of a pattern on the floor, which didn't look real at all. So we managed to do that by using black cloths and flags and filters and all kinds of accessories we have. So by the end of the day, if you look at it, looked like a completely confusing network of all kinds of these accessories on the ceiling. Even if I wanted to make a minor change in something, the size of the pattern or a position of the pattern, it required a series of changes of light, mirror, and accessories. Many a time I remember we would look up into the ceiling and wonder which one to move, or which light, which flag is cutting which light, etc. My team put up an extremely fabulous work that day, non-stop work, to create this mesmerizing lighting pattern. At some point before the shoot started, Ashutosh gave me a small historical information. He told me the peacock throne used by the Mughals in Delhi was carted away by Nadir Shah in 1739. And there is a chance that that throne ended up with Abdali's palace. There is no historical information about it, but he said there was a chance for that. And even otherwise, he might have used a similar throne if it is not the same. The important aspect is the throne was made of gold, full gold. Now he said we should see that gold in a magnificent way. It should glitter. Now I have been planning a blue scheme into that space, which means blue sunlight filtering into that and blue stained glass light and all that. Now for gold to glitter, I need warm light, and there is no warm light in the space. It's all blue scheme, and I couldn't figure out a solution to that, and I got into a sleepless night. By the next day, I figured out the art department is putting a fireplace in the center of the set. That gave me an idea. The warm light of the fire I can use. So I told them not to put it in the center, but put it a bit closer to the throne. Behind the fireplace, I added a lot of small lights facing the throne. And I added a lot of other lights for the people standing around it. Now, all these lights were connected to a DMX board through different dimmers and put on a fire flicker program. Now, this replicated the fire flicker, a warm fire flicker, and the gold started glittering. And that I got both now, like a glittering gold sitting in the middle of a blue color scheme. And the flicker of the whole thing, the fire which was happening there, added extra feel to the action scene. The introduction of Afghan king Ahmad Shah Abdali became one of the very interesting scenes in the film Panipat, and his palace a unique one. There are various ways I derive the basic elements of cinematography, like lensing, lighting, composition, movement, etc., in a film. Here I was trying to explain how I use the elements from script and history to come up with a lighting design for a scene in a historical film. Hope you like the story. Thanks for listening to me, and keep watching this space for more stories like this, and consider subscribing.